they were living under systems that were then forcing them to pay taxes and deal with other ideologies and cultural issues that were essentially harming their lives or causing them to not be able to live the life.
I think you guys just said the same thing.
So they're playing by the rules. They're playing by the rules. They're doing everything.
You're describing a victimhood mentality.
No, I'm describing people who get up and go to work.
MAGA commentator Scott Jennings appeared on Abby Phillip's show to deliver what has become a familiar routine. The panel discussion focused on the victimhood mentality surrounding Donald Trump and the broader MAGA movement. This segment examines how Trump consistently presents himself as persecuted and unfairly targeted, a narrative that has become central to MAGA politics. Jennings defended that posture while debating Abby Phillip and the rest of the CNN panel. We'll take a close look at these clips to break down how the victim narrative is framed and repeated, and I'll share my thoughts on what this exchange really reveals. Let's watch it together and unpack what's happening beneath the talking points.
Tonight, is the right becoming the left? Ben Shapiro is claiming that the party that has long criticized Democrats for having a victimhood mentality is now sending that same message to Gen Z. Listen.
I think that the right is actually weirdly feminizing young men by giving them a victimology to buy into. Listen, if you're failing in life, yes, we can get the obstacles out of your way, but it's a little your fault. It's a little your fault. You should actually pick your ass up and go out and do something useful. And this notion that you as a Gen Z male are facing these obstacles that no other human has faced for all of human history, like read a book for once. Like seriously, like go talk to your grandfather.
What do you think?
I do love listening to Ben Shapiro. Look, I think that he sees the problem he described, popping its head up on the right, and he's going to have none of it. I agree with him. Victimhood is a path to more problems. It isn't a meaning identifying oneself that way as your primary focus instead of trying to solve the problems that are out there. And he said, get yourself off your butt, start working on these problems. And I agree 100%. I mean, frankly, that attitude helped make America the greatest country in the history of the world.
I guess I'm just surprised that now, this very moment, is the first time that this thought has crossed his mind, because I do think that actually the victimhood mentality is something that has helped power Trumpism. I mean, it's all been about what they are doing to us, how we are the victims, how the immigrants are taking our jobs, how other countries are taking our jobs. Everything is victimhood in Trump's world. So this is not really all that new. I'm surprised.
I disagree with your assessment. I mean, I think what drove a lot of President Trump's coalition is a whole bunch of people who felt like they were doing everything that they've been told to do. Get up every day, go to work, pay their taxes, take care of their families, play by the rules. And they were living under systems that were then forcing them to pay taxes and deal with other ideologies and cultural issues that were essentially harming their lives or causing them to not be able to live the life.
I think you guys just said
the same thing.
So they're playing by the rules. They're playing by the rules. They're doing everything.
You're describing a victimhood mentality.
No, I'm describing people who get up and go to work. Well, if you want to describe working class America that follows the laws and pay their taxes as victims, go ahead. But that's not how conservatives.
No. But I think
But you're saying that, look, everybody is doing everything right? But other people are putting something on.
Yeah, like illegal immigrants who come here and take up public resources. They're not doing things right, but the left, and you would argue that it's okay to leave them here, and the working class of this country would say, no, they broke the rules, but they broke the rules, and I didn't, and yet they get more than I do.
Yeah, but
it's a good question.
But Scott, not all of the problems in this country are the responsibility of immigrants. Would you agree with that?
Yes, some are. Some are, and some aren't. But that's an example of something that you asked how the Trump coalition absorbs things. The
theme of Trumpism is a lot of what you're saying, that it's other countries screwing us over, it's immigrants screwing us over, and where in the Trump mentality is it that I don't know, according to Ben Shapiro, that we need to pick ourselves up and do something.
But the fascinating part about
you don't have to accept it. The Trump ethos would be, we don't have to accept it. We can fight back. And what Ben is saying, I think, is the same thing. Like, don't sit on your ass and just say, well, woe is me, I'm a victim, and there's nothing I can do about it. The actual answer is, you live in the greatest country in the world. Of course there's something.
The fascinating part about this argument, and the fascinating part about watching this argument play out just in being here, is that we've been able to articulate these same arguments for a very long period of time. that you've had 300 years of slavery, that you've had 100 years of Jim Crow, that you've had redlining, you've had the remnants of it, you've had state-sanctioned violence from Emmett Till all the way forward. And as soon as somebody articulates those things, for any reason that you may be running behind in the race that we call America, then all of a sudden we're playing victim. But in you two's mind, it doesn't quite articulate. It doesn't compute the same way.
It was very notable that Scott used the word systems that are
correct. Because
Is it wrong?
But
Is it
it's
wrong?
not wrong.
I'm
And
just
I
saying.
Expect people to enforce
But hold on, Scott.
the laws.
All I'm just saying is that when
agree
people
with
talk
you.
about systemic racism,
No, but
you
I
guys
just want.
think that you guys say that is a
but
made
my
up
only
thing.
point,
but you just describe
this is where
systems as being
this
the
is
I'm
where
describing systems where people are encouraged to break the law
this
and
is
then
where
giving no
Scott and
punishment
I.
for doing
This is
so.
where Scott and I agree, and it frustrates the people on the left who I love and the people on the right who Scott loves, because I just want the systems to be fair. Like, I don't want the systems to pick winners and losers, but I want the systems to be fair. And I think Scott would agree with that as well.
Well, let me jump
but you
in
have
and
to,
agree
but
on
you
one
also
one
have to
aspect of
realize
that,
that
too.
for 400 years they weren't, right? So we need to make sure that we do everything above and beyond. I can't make you dance. I just want everybody to have an opportunity to have an equal dance floor.
Well, good news.
Is that-
I can't make me dance. So, but
That's why I miss you, kid. Where have you been so long, kid?
Kind of connecting your comment to Abby's is the picking winners and losers. So you don't have to look Republican versus Democrat. You can look right inside the GOP at the Chamber of Commerce wing of the GOP versus ordinary people. And the Chamber of Commerce wing has been winning for most of my lifetime until along came a guy named Donald Trump. And he's very unorthodox and he does things a very different way. But he is, within the GOP, he is changing that focus. The focus has shifted much more to regular people.
Listen closely. This is where Scott Jennings and Ken Cuccinelli aren't just making an argument. They're unintentionally exposing the moral inversion at the center of modern MAGA politics. Here's what that really exposes. When Ken Cuccinelli insists that power has shifted toward regular people, he's relying on vibes instead of evidence. Under Donald Trump, wealth didn't move downward, it clustered upward. Tax cuts favored those already insulated from risk. Regulatory enforcement softened for corporations, while everyday consumers absorbed higher costs. Influence flowed to donors, lobbyists, and insiders with direct lines to the White House. Calling that populism doesn't change the outcome. It just disguises consolidation as rebellion. And this is where Abby Phillip's clarity becomes crucial. Because Scott Jennings keeps returning to a moral script that sounds familiar. Work hard, pay taxes, follow the rules. It's a story Americans recognize, but then comes the pivot. The frustration he describes isn't only about economic pressure. It's about having to share a country with people who don't fit a narrow cultural mold. Different backgrounds, different identities, different beliefs. That's not a failure of policy. That's a rejection of pluralism. And pluralism is the foundation of any functioning democracy. Here's the psychological tell in Scott Jennings' framing. Victimhood is treated like a private resource, reserved for one group and denied to everyone else. When MAGA supporters feel squeezed, it's framed as injustice. When others point to history, unequal starting points, or systemic barriers, it's dismissed as whining. Structural analysis is mocked, unless it can be weaponized against immigrants, cultural change, or social inclusion. That contradiction isn't accidental. It keeps attention away from who actually holds power. Let's be real for a moment. Across this country, people from every political background do exactly what they're told to do. They show up to work, they pursue education, they buy insurance, often at enormous cost. And still, one accident, one diagnosis, one unexpected crisis can wipe out years of effort. Not because they were reckless, but because the system leaves them exposed by design. When that reality surfaces, the personal responsibility argument suddenly evaporates. And this is the contradiction Abby Phillip keeps pressing. The same movement that claims to champion rule followers repeatedly attacks the very protections that make rule following sustainable. Federal workers who earn their pensions, retirees who planned responsibly, families who counted on healthcare, stability, and basic security. These aren't abstract line items. They're people who did everything right. Yet MAGA lawmakers rush to cut these supports while insisting they're standing up for the working class. This is where Donald Trump fits squarely into the picture. He's marketed as a defender of the forgotten, but his record tells a different story. Insider carve-outs, favor trading, policies that raise prices for consumers while shielding corporate interests, tariffs that sound tough but quietly hit working families at the checkout line. That's not fighting for everyday Americans. That's asking them to carry the burden while power stays protected. Here's the deeper structural truth this exchange reveals. Democracy isn't just about effort. It's about whether effort leads to stability, dignity, and opportunity. A system that praises hard work while stripping away safeguards isn't empowering people. It's exploiting their endurance. And grievance politics becomes the cover story that keeps that exploitation hidden, redirected toward cultural resentment instead of institutional accountability. So here's the real takeaway. If Donald Trump, defended by voices like Scott Jennings, truly believed in responsibility, they'd apply it upward, to corporations, to insiders, to those who write the rules. Accountability that only flows downward isn't leadership. It's performance dressed up as principle.
Than it ever was for most
the
of my
Chamber of
lifetime.
Commerce is at
And
the White
picking
House every single week.
But that
He
doesn't.
is totally fine with the Chamber of
Abby,
Commerce.
please.
Meta,
this isn't binary.
Google,
this isn't 0 or 1.
Apple.
Yeah, but
you know,
you can't
name
call
it. They are
This Ken Cuccinelli guy is totally full of shit.
at
Donald
the
Trump,
White House every single
you
week.
cannot
They
call a
the
Donald Trump
president and
agenda
ask for
a
favors, and
Chamber
he
of
gives-
Commerce agenda.
They call him all the time and ask for carve-outs. They ask for breaks. They ask
Which is
for
what they do.
carve-outs
They're
and
just a
tariffs.
big lobbying
I'm just
organization.
saying, the individual companies that comprise the Chamber of Commerce, they don't have to go through the chamber anymore. They can just walk right in the front doors of the White House and get the things that they're asking for. You can't. I take your point about the populism that Trump ran on, but the governance of the Trump administration has been that if OpenAI needs something, if one of these other companies needs something, they call, and then he says, you know what, we're going to exempt you from this policy. How is that not a Chamber of Commerce mindset, as opposed to what is he doing for the average American that is actually on the receiving end of his policy, specifically tariffs? The people who are going to the grocery store and buying a box of Folgers, and they're paying a markup because of tariffs. What about those people?
And what do you think the Chamber thinks of those tariffs? I think we've heard that pretty clearly.
I'm asking what do regular Americans think about those tariffs?
Americans is the key word.
Americans
well,
is the
they're
key
also
word.
alienating
young men right here with
Right.
comments.
Okay,
So,
nightcaps.
well, we're
They
not.
are next.
Listen closely, because this is the point where the entire MAGA story about power, victimhood, and the little guy finally collapses under sustained scrutiny. And Abby Phillip's calm precision makes that collapse unmistakable. Here's what that really exposes. The claim that Donald Trump is some kind of working-class champion survives almost entirely on repetition and emotional loyalty, not on outcomes. It's a story repeated so often that it becomes familiar, and familiarity gets mistaken for truth. But when you look at what actually happened, who accumulated wealth, who received exemptions, who gained access, and who absorbed rising costs, the mythology can't hold. The benefits flowed upward. The risks flowed downward. That's not populism. That's hierarchy with a different marketing strategy. And this is where Scott Jennings unintentionally reveals the mechanics of the deception. As a polished defender of the MAGA worldview, he insists that this movement speaks for forgotten Americans. But what Abby Phillip does, quietly and effectively, is remove the emotional fog and bring the discussion back to evidence. She isn't attacking motives. She's asking the most democratic question possible. Show me where the outcomes match the promises. And when that standard is applied, the argument weakens immediately. Here's the psychological engine driving all of this. Belief becomes a substitute for proof when belief feels protective. For millions of Americans, believing that Donald Trump is fighting for them offers emotional shelter from a harsher truth. that the system is structured in ways that leadership has no intention of changing. So frustration gets redirected. Immigrants become the culprit. Trans people become the threat. Cultural change becomes the enemy. That displacement isn't random. It's politically useful. It keeps anger aimed sideways instead of upward. And this is where democracy itself enters the conversation. A functioning democracy depends on accountability flowing toward those who hold power. Leaders are supposed to answer for results, not outsource blame. But grievance politics flips that logic on its head. When policies fail, it's never leadership's fault. It's always someone else's. That inversion freezes progress while keeping supporters emotionally engaged, even as their material conditions stagnate or deteriorate. Let's ground this further in reality. There are very few figures in modern American politics whose personal wealth, branding empire, and governing record are more disconnected from the lived experience of working Americans than Donald Trump. That's not hyperbole. It's observable. While families struggled with healthcare costs, housing prices, and inflation, insiders gained carve-outs and exemptions. While voters were promised protection, they were asked to absorb the consequences. This is why Abby Phillip's role in this exchange is so important. She doesn't mock the audience. She doesn't dismiss their frustrations. She simply insists on a baseline democratic principle. Claims must be tested against reality. And once you apply that principle, the image of Trump as a defender of the little guy can't survive. It dissolves under the weight of its own contradictions. Here's the deeper structural truth this moment reveals. Scapegoating is effective politics because it delays reckoning. It offers emotional release without material change. But democracy can't function indefinitely on deflection. Eventually, citizens have to ask whether their loyalty is being rewarded with stability, dignity, and opportunity, or just recycled outrage and new targets. So here's the closing truth. Progress doesn't come from endlessly hunting for someone else to blame. It comes from demanding honesty, evidence, and accountability from those who actually hold power. Democracy weakens when grievance replaces responsibility. It strengthens when people are willing to question even the leaders they want to believe in. That's the real divide this moment exposes. And it's not left versus right. It's accountability versus illusion.